Good evening and welcome to Scotland at 7 here on Broadcasting Scotland. My name's Kenny McBride and tonight I'm joined by two of our regular guests. I'm joined firstly by Chris McCusker from the SNP Socialist Group and also by Sam Payton from the Save Loch Lomond Group. And Sam, how are you tonight?
I'm great, Kenny. How are you?
I'm not bad. And Chris, how about you?
Yeah, all good in the hood here, Kenny.
Excellent. Well, we start tonight, as always, with our update on the coronavirus statistics. And as of 2 p.m. today in Scotland, there have been a total of 51,499 coronavirus tests concluded. Of these, 40,728 were negative, 10,721 tests were positive. 126 patients were in intensive care last night, with 114 of those having tested positive. There were a total of 1,754 people in hospital with either confirmed or suspected COVID-19 infections. That marks an increase of 197 confirmed cases since yesterday. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection has sadly risen to 1,332. This number only includes those who have died in hospital having received a positive test for the virus. The latest UK daily figures available show that 21,092 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 360. Again, this only refers to those who have died in hospital following a positive test. The Office of National Statistics today published more complete figures for the week ending 17th of April. These show that 19,112 people had died with COVID-19 in England and Wales by that date. This is almost 3,000 more than the UK government's daily running total at the time. However, for just that week, the new figures show total deaths were 11,854 above the 5-year average. These were not necessarily deaths directly related to a coronavirus infection, but include all excess mortality. There are a range of possibilities behind this, including people not seeking attention for urgent problems, for fear of being a burden on the NHS, or fear of catching the virus in hospital. As ever, Broadcasting Scotland urges you to seek medical attention if you believe you're unwell. GPs are still available for telephone consultations and the emergency services remain active. The NHS is open and the coronavirus should not prevent anyone getting the urgent help they need. And Sam, just to come to you first, I mean, this gap between what's reported for total deaths versus the average is really substantial. I mean, almost 12,000 extra deaths in that week versus the average. Now, clearly, some of those are coronavirus cases, but some of them are other things. What do you make of this huge number of extra deaths?
It's actually quite scary. Again, it's this part of the show that I really don't feel comfortable talking about because it's people's lives and people's family members. But as you said, Kenny, people have got to, it doesn't matter, even though, how can I put this, even though we've got COVID-19 and we don't want to put the NHS under pressure, unnecessary pressure, people have got to be seeking medical advice and help when it's required and needed. And, you know, I think we've been so busy concentrating on COVID-19, we've kind of forgotten that there's other illnesses, there's other diseases, there's other conditions out there that people really need to seek advice on, whether, you know, and it's for all age groups. You know, right from birth right through to the elderly. And I think we need to kind of somehow and I noticed that the briefings, this is now being said, you know, remember the NHS is still open, the GP surgeries are still opened. And I hope people are phoning up their GPs. I know it's not easy getting through to our GP surgeries. I tried to phone up the other day and it's quite difficult to get through. But yeah, just keep trying because it's important that people are still seeking medical advice.
Yeah. Yeah, and Chris, you were just talking about your brother having this infection that he's had to keep getting monitored. How easy have you found it to get through to the GP and get that kind of care for your brother?
Well, it's been kind of hit and miss because obviously the GPs are stretched to say the least. So you honestly feel like sometimes that they're possibly ignoring the telephone because they're probably running about like headless chickens. But it's the communication between the two. It's the communication. I mean, my elder brother's been treated in the house just now by the district nurse. But then it's the district nurse that needs to contact the doctor. It's the doctor that then needs to phone over to the chemist in order to give the prescription. I was greatly exasperated by Boots the chemist, although there are other chemists. This was all done in the morning, and the district nurse said to me, give it a couple of hours. So I said, right, okay, I'll phone maybe about 4 in the afternoon and see if the prescription's ready, rather than going and sort of like waiting in a queue to find out that it's not been made up or it's not ready or whatever. And they just constantly put the phone down on me every time I phoned. Do you know what I mean? With no explanation. Thankfully, I did. I went. I waited in a fairly short queue. Thankfully. It took about 10 or 15 minutes or something like that once I got into the actual shop. So that's all fine. But people should not be scared, to sort of like hide their illness. But it is understandable because people don't want to put themselves in the environment that they perceive to be the most risky. If you're constantly washing your hands and watching what you touch, and you're covering your face, the last place that you want to go is a hospital. But possibly the hospital is probably the most safest place that you could go, because it'll be the most sanitised place. You would like to think, anyway.
Yeah. I mean, for the majority of things, whether if you're going in with a cancer referral or whatever, then those places are kept as clean as possible. They're keeping people who have the coronavirus as far away from those wards as possible. So again, we just do urge you, if you have a lump or a bump, if you think if you think somebody's having a heart attack or a stroke or whatever, then do what you have to do. Call your doctor, call 999 if need be. The NHS, as we said, it's under strain, and that you might have to wait a wee while on the phone, but it's much better to take that wee wait than it is to end up having a much worse outcome because you were afraid to make that call. So once again, the NHS is open, even if it's sometimes a wee bit of a struggle to get through on the phone, as Chris was saying. So please do look after yourselves in that way. But we move on now to a report from the Resolution Foundation. Working women are most likely to be bearing the health risks from coronavirus by being key workers, while young people in the low paid are most likely to work in sectors of the economy that have been shut down, according to a new report published today by the Resolution Foundation. While the current economic crisis is affecting everyone, the report, called Risky Business, focuses on who is most likely to face health risks by continuing to work in jobs where complete social distancing is not always possible, and who face the economic risk of not working at all from their firm operating in a shut-down sector of the economy. It found that women are twice as likely to work in key worker roles as men, including 2 in 5 working mothers. The bottom 30% of earners are more than twice as likely to be employed in key worker sectors as the top 10%. The SNP's Women and Equality spokesperson Anne McLaughlin said, "The UK government must strengthen welfare protections by scrapping the 5-week wait for the first universal credit payment, implementing grants instead of advance payment loans, reversing the benefit cap, and introducing a universal basic income for everyone. It could also make a start by following Scotland's lead and ensuring all care workers in England receive the real living wage and matching Scotland's NHS spending per capita. This crisis has exposed the deep flaws in UK government policy and the deep-rooted inequality in society. Fundamental changes are necessary to ensure we learn the lessons and create a more equitable society. And so, Sam, I come to you first as a working mother yourself. What do you make of this report?
I'm going to say I'm not surprised, and that's just from my personal point of view, so please nobody jump on me when I say that. Because majority of people I know that work in the care sector are women and mums. I do know some men at work, but majority are women and mums. So yeah, they are putting themselves at risk because they're the ones that are kind of going out there visiting the people, especially people that are got to get the care packages at home and things like that, because that's still got to happen at the now. That's still got to be ongoing. So yeah, these are people that are genuinely putting themselves at risk right now, and their families at risk too. In terms of, the government do need to bring England and Wales up to speed with same level as Scotland for the real living wage. It's just disgusting that they're not. It's a shame that there is, but there needs to be more done. I know that from a working mum's point of view, and I'm not in the care industry, I was talking to another mum today, social distancing, we're 2 metres apart, having a blether, and she is self-employed. And what seems to be happening is there's a lot of self-employed mums are on the child tax credits. And if they transfer over to universal credits, they get less money. And this hasn't been kind of brought up yet. And when the government had announced the universal credit, people are self-employed can apply for universal credit. There was a lot of people out there that jumped over to universal credit, who actually then ended up finding themselves in the position, no money for 5 weeks, plus less money than what they would have had with child tax credits. So there is a bit of confusion about, people, what if they really should go on to universal credit, or children, or stay where they are on children's tax credits. But the mum I was talking to, she's like me, she stayed on the child tax credits. We didn't jump over. But yeah, this way universal credit, this 5 week wait, and they are getting encouraged to apply for these loans or advance payments, as they like to call them. It's absolutely disgusting, because this is a way of keeping people in poverty. This is not helping people. As much as they say, oh yes, but this is going to help you and this will help you until you get your first payment. It might help in the short term, but long term, that's putting people into debt. They've still got to pay that back. And what happens when people go back to work, say if their industries open back up again, their sectors open back up again, and they then find themselves, they're one of the kind of group of people are allowed to go back to work. What happens then? Because then they still owe this money to the government. So how's this money going to be collected? Is it going to come out and are they going to be given a letter? You owe us X amount of money and you must pay it within so many days, or are they going to allow to pay it back, instalments? This is something, again, it's not been addressed. How, when people do start going back to work, when they've had these advance payments, how do they pay them back?
Yeah, well, we do have some of what you were saying is covered in a story that we're going to talk about in a wee bit. But I'll just come to Chris now. Chris, I saw a tweet today that I thought would appeal to you. It said something along the lines of, why don't we just see all these entrepreneurs just create some more wealth? We keep hearing that they're the wealth creators. Why don't they just do that? Do they not need these? Maybe they actually do need these workers after all. But we see this all the time, that 30% of the bottom 30% of earners are more than twice as likely to be in what are called key work sectors as the top 10% of earners. This is something that I'm sure, with your socialist hat on, you've got a few things to say about.
Well, first thing that has to be said is that wealthy capitalists will always look to exploit the workforce, and they will look to do it the cheapest way possible. And that is through wages, but it's also through terms and conditions, and everything else that goes along with it, in-service benefits and stuff like that. And on a day, actually, I would like to highlight that it was all trade unions observed a minute's silence today for the workers who have sadly died. Mm-hmm. The wider benefits that workers get exploited to by the UK government with the sharp attack on the trade union bill, which happened a couple of years ago, which eroded quite a few of our key worker rights. It's of no surprise to me that there is a wider call for entrepreneurs to sink some money into the economy. The problem that being is that the economy has shrunk so much, and there's very little room for manoeuvre when it comes to diversity, because you're not going to open up a lucrative company where you can't adhere to the social distancing, and with the added cost of PPE and stuff like that. It's probably not a viable thing. I always remember my dad saying that rich people are rich because they don't part with their money very readily, and they only do it for a profit. So the point that I did want to make about the Resolution Foundation's findings, predominantly being on women, I can accept that, yes, but we have to take into consideration the amount of young men who are working within the gig economy. Mm-hmm. And I don't mean to sound sexist in any such way, shape or form, but you predominantly find that it's young male students who are the ones that are jumping on bikes in order to work for Deliveroo or Uber Eats or all these mm-hmm. various horrible companies that have sprung up within the gig economy. But again, I'll go back to what Anne's been a ferocious campaigner on this. She also serves on the Socialist Executive with me as well. So, I've got complete confidence and solidarity with Anne and her ventures. And knowing Anne, she will not give this up.
Yeah. Yeah, as you said, the young people are the most affected in terms of being in sectors that have shut down. For example, like hospitality, people doing bar jobs and things like that, where clearly that's often young people, as you say, many of them students or recent graduates, often doing those kind of jobs. It's a fascinating report. We do recommend that you have a look at it if you get that opportunity. Well, we move on now to another sector, and up to 30,000 jobs in the country's oil and gas sector are at risk, according to a report from Oil and Gas UK, the industry representative body of UK's offshore oil and gas. The global oil industry has been severely hit by a crash in demand as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. The price of Brent crude, which is the international benchmark, fell last week to its lowest level since 1999. After US oil prices turned negative for the first time in history. The supply drop turned into an oil price crisis when a price war between Saudi Arabia and Russia erupted. However, record global supply cuts were agreed this month, and these will take effect from next month. Most oil and gas operators in the North Sea are now planning deeper spending cuts, while many companies have already announced layoffs. SNP Shadow Financial Secretary to the Treasury, Stephen Flynn MP, said, "The stark warning about job losses confirms what I see on the ground in Aberdeen. After providing almost £350 billion to the Treasury coffers over the years, it's high time the UK government supported the oil and gas sector in its time of need. The time for action is now in order to protect energy security, jobs and energy regions, as well as taking the opportunity to put the energy transition at the heart of the sector. Oil and Gas UK's three-stage framework has to be considered seriously by the UK government, which must now take immediate action to secure and deliver on the sector's needs." And Chris, to come to you, we spoke to Stephen Flynn on Friday night on our special show looking at the oil industry, and he talked at length about the crisis that's facing Aberdeen, because obviously Aberdeen is already hit by the crisis with the virus. We know that Aberdeen is expected to be the worst hit city in Britain by Brexit. And now this oil price crash is just layering misery on misery for Aberdeen. Now, obviously, we have to look at a transition towards a carbon-free future. But in the meantime, the government really has to do something to help protect this industry, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, what we have to do, first of all, Kenny, is we have to make the distinction on what government the First Minister again reiterated today at FMQs when she was asked a similar question about the oil and gas sector, and she replied, not making a political point, she stressed, but the powers over the oil and gas sector lie firmly with Westminster. So they need to get the finger out and as you say, give something back for the years that they have mismanaged the revenue that has been taken from the oil fields. But to go back to Friday night's show, it was excellent. I was absolutely fascinated by what Stephen was saying. And the other chap as well that was on, I can't remember his name, the councillor from Inverurie.
Neil Bailey.
I mean, he made some fascinating points as well. And notwithstanding that, he also made the very important point about the just transition that you were talking about, and that has to be looked at. Long before COVID, if you'll indulge me for just a second, the SNP Trade Union Group have been talking. Last year, we were talking about the need for a just and greener transition from the oil and gas sector, so that we could possibly, as the industry changes, that the jobs could be easily migrated over towards working within a newer, more sustainable green industry. And yet there is no easy sort of like short, sharp shock treatment. It has to be a transition which is done over time. But the main issue that we've got to come back to, and I think what Stephen was really underlying, is that whilst we've been through all a real stage of turmoil, within the Aberdeen economy, which has been, struggling for years, since the early 1990s. It's always been struggling due to underfunding, and that underfunding coming from Westminster. Now is a good time to start from a lower base and start working upwards, to harness the new possibilities. But that can only be done with cooperation from the UK government whilst we're still in, dare I say, this unholy alliance that we find ourselves in. But it could be done a lot easier if we were starting from scratch, and scratch being independence.
Yeah. Yeah, we will move on though. As I said, we talked about that in great length on Friday. You can still find that in our archives. It was a really interesting show for me. I do recommend, if you have any interest in the oil industry or in the economy in the Northeast, is well worth a look. Neil Bailey, the councillor from Inverurie, has a lot of experience in the industry, and Stephen Flynn, the MP for Aberdeen South, both excellent guests, had a lot to say. We would encourage you to go and have a look at that show if you get the chance. Moving on though, the SNP has said that Boris Johnson must agree to a 2-year extension to the Brexit transition period, urging the Prime Minister to put the economy ahead of the demands of Tory hardliners. In a letter today, Ian Blackford said Boris Johnson must show leadership and warned that failing to agree an extension would cause unforgivable damage to jobs, businesses, living standards and the economy. The SNP Westminster leader also called for a meeting in the coming days to discuss the UK government's wider response to the coronavirus crisis. Ian Blackford MP said Boris Johnson must put his responsibilities to the UK government ahead of the demands of Tory hardliners and urgently agree a 2-year extension to the Brexit transition period. Ploughing ahead with a hard Brexit deadline and threatening the disaster of no deal in the middle of a global pandemic and economic crisis would cause unforgivable damage to jobs, businesses, living standards and the economy. The clock is ticking. The Tory leader must show leadership. Many businesses would struggle to survive another crisis piled onto the one we already face. The SNP will continue to press the UK government to deliver increased financial support for people and businesses, and for a Brexit extension to avoid further damage we simply cannot afford. And this, Sam, as we said, this ties in some ways to the previous story. There is just crisis upon crisis for many industries. And we heard, Michael Gove, for example, today saying that there was no chance of an extension, which would have to be agreed by the end of June if it was going to be agreed at all. Do you get the sense that Boris Johnson will be listening to this plea from Ian Blackford?
Well, no. That's basically the short answer to that one. No, he's not going to be listening. He's got his own agenda, as they always do. They're going to plough ahead with this Brexit. And basically, I honestly think they are going to be looking for a no-deal Brexit, and they're going to use COVID as the perfect escape, so to speak, to get the no deal. I was watching Ian Blackford tonight before we came on show on Sky, doing an interview, and yes, good on him, good on the SNP for putting pressure on the Tory government, but I honestly don't think they are going to, in any shape or form, take this seriously from any opposition to Brexit or asking for any form of extension. Mm-hmm. I just don't see it happening at all. They have got their own agenda, COVID or no COVID, and they will plough ahead, and that's what I see happening. To me, at the moment, COVID just seems to be the perfect storm just to go plough ahead, and it takes off the onus of the responsibility when things go wrong for Brexit, because they can blame everything on COVID-19 at the moment. Yeah.
Well, obviously, that will be a story we have to keep an eye on. As I said, the decision has to be made by the end of June for an extension beyond December the 31st. So clearly something has to happen soon, and we will keep watching out for that. But to go back to something that Sam was discussing earlier, the SNP has called for the unfair disparity between the UK government's benefit system to be resolved, with a cash boost given to people claiming legacy benefits such as the Job Seekers allowance and employment support allowance. The Chancellor recently announced the Universal Credit Standard Allowance and the Working Tax Credit Basic Element will increase above the planned annual uprating. However, this uplift does not apply to people on legacy benefits. Those who will not receive this increase are those on Job Seekers Allowance, Employment Support Allowance and Income Support, and also those affected by the benefit cap. This creates an unfair disparity between claimants on the old and new systems. A single person over 25 applying for universal credit will now get a weekly amount of £94.59, in comparison to a JSA claimant who will get £74.35, a difference of almost £20 per week. Bob Doris, MSP, said, "Of course, the recently announced measures designed to protect the incomes of large numbers of people whose livelihoods have been adversely impacted by the COVID-19 crisis are welcome. But these support measures need to go further. There now exists an unfair disparity between claimants on the old and new systems, which could leave those claiming legacy benefits facing financial challenges, especially after several years of a benefit freeze introduced by the Tories. It's vital that the UK government seriously considers the concerning effects of this two-tier system and provides an equivalent uplift to those claiming legacy benefits. Support must be put back in place to help people through this crisis, and these changes should be implemented with immediate effect that ensure everyone has a safety net to support them through this difficult time." And Chris, this welfare reform has been one of the key goals of this Tory government for the last 10 years. And yet it's been one of the things that they've been most consistently criticised on. The universal credit itself has had all kinds of problems with the 5-week wait, with the rape clause. But this disparity now between the old system and the new, what do you make of this?
Well, I mean, it just shows the inequality of the benefit system, and it shows that the benefit system is not fit for purpose. And unfortunately, in Jeremy Corbyn's tenure as leader of the Labour Party, he was consistent on this, but he was not blameless because his party actually helped shape the reformation of the benefit system to some certain degree, and the Tories just used it, carte blanche to carry on with their macabre carve-up by Ian Duncan Smith. So again, quite clearly, the benefit system is broken, and this is where thankfully the First Minister is on board, but the SNP Socialist Group have been calling for a universal basic income, and this needs to be addressed, and during the pandemic of COVID-19 would be an ideal time to at least trial it and see how it works. I wish that people in England could actually see what the Scottish Government have done with the limited powers that it's got over the benefit system. Many times I have said to you, Kenny, about the benefits that myself as an unpaid carer gets.
Of course, yeah.
Which is absolutely sweet Fanny Adams. And the inequality of that, to be paid £8 less than someone else who is employed directly by the health board, that should just tell you to wake up and smell the coffee for starters. But the reason that I point out the Scottish Government is the fact that, in a small token of esteem, the Scottish Government do pay unpaid carers a top-up allowance of £442 two times a year. So that's about £220 that we get, which cannot be touched by the UK government for recompense and stuff like that. The other point that I wanted to make, if I can quickly do so, that earlier on Sam was talking about, the sanctions that people get when they're on universal credit and claiming family tax credits and stuff like that. You know, and it's no fault to you, Sam, but you've failed to mention the fact that the people that fall through the gap in that scenario are the people who are migrated from the old benefit to the new benefit without even being consulted on beforehand. The job centres, or should I say the DWP, arbitrarily done this, and people were none the wiser until they actually seen a fall in their money and went to go and check, and it was explained by the fact that they were naturally migrated, and this was done by postcodes.
Yeah.
And the first one, I think, to be trialled upon was Inverclyde. It was Ronnie Cowan's constituency down in Greenock, just over the water from Sam. So, the whole benefit system is, you know, the word that I want to use, I'm not allowed to use, but, you know, it is pumped. It is totally defunct, and it needs to be restarted again. And nobody is going to be surprised when I say that, you know, when we get independence, we will be, you know, able to address this inequality. But the one quick thing that I'm going to quickly, if I can, it'll be interesting to see how Spain are going to handle this, because Spain are actually introducing a universal basic income, I believe, the middle of May. Possibly the start of June.
Yeah, it's a form of UBI. Yeah, we will be taking a look at that once it comes in. I'm sure we'll have Pilar back on to talk about it.
To see how that goes down and at what level it is paid out. You know, and that would give us a rough sort of like ballpark figure that we could possibly be looking at.
Yeah. As you say, we will look at that when it comes in, and we spoke to Pilar on Sunday. I'm sure we'll get her back in to tell us all about how that's going. Moving on though, the SNP has criticised the UK government's defence of no recourse to public funds rules and renewed calls for them to be suspended immediately, saying everyone should have equal access to financial protections, safe housing and healthcare during the coronavirus pandemic. Today, Glasgow East MP David Linden asked the Secretary for Housing, Communities and Local Government why people are still being told that they have no recourse to public funds and being left in complete isolation at the height of this pandemic, despite the Prime Minister saying last month that these people would get the support they need. Robert Jenrick responded by defending the current rules and saying that councils are able to use their discretion within the law. Commenting, David Linden said, "Coronavirus doesn't respect borders or immigration status. Therefore, everyone in the UK, including those with no recourse to public funds, should get the help they need to get through this crisis safely and without facing destitution. The Home Office must immediately suspend no recourse to public funds conditions and follow through on the Prime Minister's promise that those in this position get the support they need. Saving all lives must be the priority." And Sam, you know, we've seen in the last week or so, we've seen talks about asylum seekers being, you know, herded into hotels in close proximity without any sort of protection. And now we're hearing that as they have no recourse to public funds, many of them have been left destitute because there is no other way for them to get an income. What do you think of this story here?
Between this story and the previous story, I'm absolutely fuming. I am absolutely fuming. It is disgusting that this is how we are treating people, the most vulnerable in our society. I'm going to say, Chris was very polite. I was with these earlier. I'm absolutely livid that the fact that they, they've got people from all angles. They really have. At the best of times before Corona, life was bloody difficult. It is tough. With benefits, people with immigration and things like that. And, you know, people come to this country because for safety reasons, for themselves and their families. And to then be treated like second-class citizens for people who are claiming benefits because they have got no choice to be then treated like second-class citizens. At the end of the day, is absolutely vulgar. And it is just, the Tory government, to think that people have voted these people in who just seem to think that this, in their mind, is acceptable. I just don't get. I really do not get how people find this acceptable in any shape or form. People don't come to this country and leave their families and leave their lifestyles just for the sake of it, just to, as a wee whim. They come here because they've got no choice. Where they're living is dangerous. And they've got to protect them and their families. And I'm just absolutely fuming, Kenny. Absolutely livid. I'm going on my soapbox. I'm standing off it.
Well, we will move on before we all lose our tempers here to a story that maybe might make you a wee bit angry as well. The BBC is the most trusted source of information in the UK about the coronavirus outbreak, according to a new survey published by Ofcom. Across the UK, more than 3/4 of respondents said BBC TV was their most trusted source, while closed groups on Facebook were the least trusted. The BBC was only slightly less trusted in Scotland than in other parts of the UK. Other broadcasters were more popular in Scotland and Northern Ireland than in England and Wales, with over half of people in Northern Ireland using UTV as a major source and almost 40% in Scotland citing STV. Use of social media, especially Twitter, was notably higher in Scotland than in England and Wales. Respondents in Scotland were less likely to say they were confused about what they should be doing in response to COVID-19 compared to those in England and Wales. People in Scotland and Northern Ireland were also less likely to say that the mainstream media was exaggerating the seriousness of the disease. According to the survey, compliance with lockdown measures remains high across all 4 nations, with Northern Ireland having a slightly but statistically significantly higher rate of compliance than any of the other 3. And Chris, we'll come to you first. What do you think of the fact that, firstly, that the BBC is still a trusted source of information for people about the coronavirus?
Sorry, I've just picked myself off the floor and sat back down again, Kenny. I just couldn't believe that what you were reading out there. This is absolutely horrendous. I mean, who the hell compiles this feckin' report? I mean, the BBC in the last couple of years have been worse than Pravda. It's absolutely horrendous. They give the UK government such an easy ride. It's absolutely unreal. When you know things are really messed up, when I am actually lauding Piers Morgan for holding English MPs to account and basically grabbing them by the throat virtually, and saying to them, no, I'm sorry, you're wrong. You don't know the answer to this. And, there was one, James O'Brien as well, constantly does it each and every day. He calls out the UK Tory party. Look, we all know that the BBC is just a mouthpiece of Tory propaganda. It always has been, it always will be. Even if we did, by some minor miracle, get a Labour government, they would still hit the Labour movement over the head with a big stick. The last subject we were talking about was inequality. Now we've got the most unequal broadcasting entity in the whole of Britain, and it is anarchic. It is absolutely anarchic, where it pays the most exuberant salaries to some of the most untalented people I have ever had misfortune to come across on my television. Again, no disrespect to the producer tonight, but is she seriously trying to give me a heart attack?
Well, we must stress that the opinions of our guests are not necessarily the views of Broadcasting Scotland itself, but we do turn to Sam now. Sam,
you're being very brave there, Kenny.
Well, Sam, I do want to raise one particular point. This report brought up that respondents in Scotland were less confused about how to respond to COVID-19, and they felt that the mainstream media were less likely to be exaggerating the seriousness of the disease. What do you think that says about either the government or the media in Scotland versus England and Wales?
Well, first of all, I would like to know who done this report. I imagine it's Ofcom. BBC themselves, or Ofcom, or somewhere else.
It was Ofcom.
However, it is utter BS. It's basically the politest way that I can put it without getting anyone into trouble. And yes, this is my own personal opinion, nothing to do with Broadcasting Scotland. What a load of BS. It's been, especially here in Scotland, we know what the BBC's like for propaganda. Even lately, you can see more and more people down in England even complaining about BBC, spouting propaganda from the Tory government. But up here in Scotland, it was interesting they're saying about Twitter. We rely more on Twitter for our news. We rely more on independent sources. We are more aware of the propaganda of mainstream media. We tend to do our own research more, which probably makes us a wee bit more politically aware, which is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. In terms of the COVID-19, one of the things that, because I've been kind of watching the briefings every day and things like that. And one of the things that is very apparent is when you're watching the UK government briefing every day, they will use the words, and the mainstream media will use the words the UK. But what they're meaning is England, Wales. They're not talking about Northern Ireland or Scotland, they're talking about England, Wales. And when they're talking about the figures, a lot of the time it's England. When you look at the slides and things, it's England, Wales, and it is very much centred around England, Wales, but they use the wording and the terminology of UK. And it is quite confusing, because then you've got to sit and go, right, does that include Scotland? Does it not include Scotland? Does it include the Four Nations, or does it not include the Four Nations? So you've got to kind of, you've got to have the brain working kind of double time, which in my case is not very good. But however, when you're listening to the Scottish Government's briefings, they're very more clear, they're very more concise about, this is what we're doing in Scotland, and this is what our advice is, and this is our recommendations. We don't talk for the rest of the UK. We don't, you need to ask them the questions. The only thing is that I would like to see more Scottish-based media present at the Scottish Government briefings rather than UK-based. And that's my personal opinion, because a lot of the UK-based are not actually then reporting what Nicola's saying. So I would actually like to see more Scottish-based independent media at the Scottish.
I think all of us. I think all of us would.
The thing is, sorry.
I think all of us would like to see that. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. But I just find, honestly, what are you trying to do to us tonight with the stories? That's 3 stories now. I've been absolutely. I think my blood pressure will be hitting the roof now.
Well,
thank you, Kerry and Linda.
Well, that does let us roll into this next story, because Scotland's accident emergency departments continue to perform well during the coronavirus crisis, emphasising the Scottish Government's message that the NHS is open to deal with emergency medical problems. For the week ending April 19th, 95.2% of people were seen and treated within the 4-hour target. Commenting on the statistics, Health Secretary Jeane Freeman said, "The staff in our NHS are providing an exceptional level of care during these extraordinary times. Each and every staff member has my very grateful thanks. While members of the public are continuing to listen to advice and are only going to A&E if illnesses are immediate or life-threatening, I want to remind people not to ignore early warning signs of serious conditions. If you have new symptoms, then it's vital you get this checked out, either by contacting your GP, calling 111, or if symptoms are urgent, by attending A&E. We are working closely with health boards and partnerships to ensure robust plans are in place to strengthen capacity and minimise the impact of COVID-19 across the health system." And also, primary care services will remain open during the May public holidays, Health Secretary Jeane Freeman has confirmed. Funded by £8.2 million from the Scottish Government, GP services and community pharmacies have been asked to remain open on the May public holidays, with NHS 24 operating with an increased number of call handlers. Ms Freeman has praised the response and dedication of healthcare staff across the country who are ensuring people can continue to access services during the pandemic. She said, "Health and social care staff are already working incredibly hard to look after people during this pandemic, and I want to thank each and every one of them. Last month we asked GP services to remain open during the Easter holidays, and once again we have asked them to do the same for the May public holidays. Community pharmacies will also be open so they can continue to provide advice and treatment through the extended minor ailment service for minor illnesses and common conditions. We have also taken steps to ensure that NHS 24 can continue to meet the increase in demand." And Sam, this is basically what we were talking about at the top of the show, but obviously the Scottish Government making efforts there to ensure that people do know that the NHS is open and that it is going to be open, for example, during the holidays. What do you think of these announcements from Jeane Freeman?
Yeah, I think it's just, again, what we were saying at the beginning of the show is just keep reminding people that the NHS is opened. And if you've got any new symptoms or you're worried about anything, pick up the phone, visit A&E. As a mum, however, I am very aware at the moment with a very energetic 8-year-old. I'm very much, and I'm sure there's a few parents out there pretty much the same. It's like, please don't run in the house and please don't do this because I'm not taking you to A&E right now, especially at the moment. And because we've got to cycle to go shopping, and when we were out cycling doing our shopping, it's very much don't go too fast and please pay attention. We don't want to go to A&E because I don't have a car and don't have transport. A lot of people will naturally be more cautious and more careful with how they're behaving and what they're doing with things. But yeah, it's very important that people do still go to the A&E or phone up NHS 24 if they're worried or concerned about anything at all.
Absolutely. Yeah. And finally, research projects to increase the understanding of coronavirus, screen potential treatments and support clinical trials will benefit from almost £5 million of Scottish Government funding. The money will support 55 rapid research projects in 15 Scottish universities and research institutions, contributing to global efforts to combat the virus and its wider effects, including research to better understand the effects of infection, develop and test new diagnostics and treatments, investigate new disease surveillance approaches, inform interventions to prevent transmission of infection, support the mental health of frontline health and social care workers, and to understand the physical and mental health implications of lockdown measures. Health Secretary Jeane Freeman said, "Scotland is home to some of the most respected researchers and scientists in the world. COVID-19 is the biggest challenge we've faced in our lifetimes, and it is vital that we capture the potential of the extraordinarily strong research base here to contribute to the global efforts to tackle and mitigate the impact of it. I know many academics are already thinking about how their research can be used during this national and international emergency. This funding enables universities and research institutions to immediately draw on the very best science and methodologies available to build on our understanding of this virus, develop new treatments, stop infection, and support people's mental and physical health." And Chris, this has got to be good news, hasn't it?
Well, yeah, it's very welcome news, the fact that there is extensive research and development going on, and you would like to think that if we weren't living in this COVID pandemic, that this would certainly very much be the case. But you know me, Kenny, I'm not a great one for one-upmanship. But he says firmly with tongue in cheek. I am so looking forward to when we come out of the pandemic and when comparisons are drawn between the performance of the Scottish Government's health care and the English NHS. It is going to be day and night. It is a stark reality. And going back to what I said earlier on about how I just wish that the poor people in England and Wales can actually see how much the wool is getting pulled over their eyes. I mean, if we're talking about the fact that A&E's performing at its best at this moment in time, I shudder to think what is happening down there. I really do, because it was struggling, long before COVID-19 came around, despite what Jackson Carlaw would tell you. Again, it shows that even during a pandemic, Scotland is still able to get on with the, in inverted commas, day job. I have to take my hats off to the Scottish Parliament, the MSPs in the Scottish Parliament who have said that they will work together in a consensus based approach, in order to deliver these results. I just really, really hope, and I know that Nicola keeps on saying that, I hate to use the word, now's not the time, but now is not the time for, political point scoring, but God, am I looking forward to the end of it when it is time for political point scoring, because we have got so much to call the Tories out on, and we've got so much to sit back and take a contented view that our Scottish NHS has been absolutely champion at in their performance rates.
Well, that is quite a note to end on. So thank you to Chris McCusker and to Sam Payton for joining us. It's always a pleasure to have both of you. And thank you to you at home for joining us as well. If you're able to support Broadcasting Scotland, if we are one of your trusted sources that you'd like to support, then please do go to broadcastingscotland.scot/register. Sign up as a supporter there. Your £5 a month can help us develop everything that we do here, from the quantity of shows, the quality of shows, the type of shows we produce. All of that comes from the money that you're able to give us. We do know that it's tough at this time, but we have had a lot of new donations just in the last week or so, and we thank you so much for that. It makes such a difference here, just knowing that we're able to keep the lights on, we're able to keep producing shows for you is incredibly rewarding, and the trust that you put in us to bring you the news and to be honest with you is huge, and we do offer our absolute heartfelt thanks for that. For those of you who aren't able to afford it, though, again, please don't worry. That's we understand how tight things are for a lot of people, even at the best of times, never mind in the middle of the biggest economic crisis any of us has ever faced. You can still help us out, though. Follow us on Twitter at Broadcast Scot. Follow us on Facebook. Just search Broadcasting Scotland. We'll come up first thing. And you can then share the shows around, let people know about Broadcasting Scotland. We rely on you to let people know where we are and what we're doing. So if you would like to do that, please do. It's a huge help to us. It helps us to grow our audience. And a personal recommendation from you is the best recommendation anyone can have. for why they should watch Broadcasting Scotland. And finally, if you'd like to get involved, I had somebody get in touch with me just this week saying they wanted to get involved somehow. If you'd like to get involved, however that might be, whether it's working behind the scenes, in front of the camera, there's always work to be done with Broadcasting Scotland, always things you can do to help us develop the quality of these shows, develop into the independent broadcaster that Scotland deserves. So if you're interested in getting involved, whether as a journalist, a presenter, a camera operator, a sound operator, whatever it is, there's always things that you can do here at Broadcasting Scotland. So do please get in touch. But that is all we've got time for tonight. So I'll be back again tomorrow at 7. We will have Andrew. I've forgotten Andrew's surname from All Under One Banner. We will have him on tomorrow night. Sam and Chris, I'm sure we'll speak to both of you again very soon. But until tomorrow night, I've been Kenny McBride. Have a great evening. Wilson.